Good evening and a very warm welcome to you all. My name is Jack Yates. I am the Communications Officer here at the Royal Armouries. I hope you can all hear me fine. If you could just stick a comment in the chat on the right there and give us a shout, let us know where you're dialing in from tonight and just let me know that we are legible to you all. So the format for the next hour or so is we're going to be beaming to you on Facebook and YouTube. We're going to be hearing from our fantastic guests here tonight, and there will be the opportunity to ask some questions throughout and a dedicated question and answer session at the end as well. So if you keep your questions coming throughout the night, we'll get to as many of those as we can. A few things that it is incumbent on me to talk about are our new membership scheme that we have just announced. And what the membership scheme gets you is exclusive access to lots of discounts, lots of exclusive events, and also, as many of you will be aware, we have announced our reopening date, which is very exciting. It's on the 16th of September. And if you want access to priority tickets, then join our membership scheme and you will be able to jump the queue for those. I'll post a link in the comments so you can do that, but you can also find it on our website as well. It's also worth mentioning that this is not our final live stream of the week. We have another one tomorrow, also on Facebook and YouTube, and that is with our Keeper of Firearms and Artillery, Jonathan Ferguson, and he will be interviewing Larry Zarnoff. Larry is a world-renowned firearms expert, and he's worked in Hollywood for many years on titles such as Iron Man, Dunkirk, Captain America, as well as the Call of Duty franchise. That's at 7 o'clock tomorrow, so definitely not one to miss. So if I may introduce our speakers for tonight. So joining me is Natasha Bennett. Natasha is the Curator of Oriental Collections here at the Royal Armouries in Leeds. She joined the museum in March 2011 as a curatorial assistant and has been Curator of the Oriental Collections since 2017. I'm also joined by Gurinder Mann. Gurinder is a historian and director of the Sikh Museum Initiative. He's the author of 3 books on Sikh scriptures and history, including The British and the Sikhs book, which has been out for a couple of months now, and you can pick that up on a website called helion.com. That's Helion, sorry, not .com, .co.uk, helion.co.uk. And last but no means least, I'm joined by Taran Singh, and Taran is an expert in 3D technologies and has worked as a 3D designer. He runs his own 3D design company, which is called Taran 3D. So without further ado, Gurinder, could you tell us a little bit more about how the partnership between the Royal Armouries and the Anglo-Sikh Museum came about?
Yes, of course. Good evening. I would like to welcome everybody from around the world who's watching at this moment in time. And I'd like to thank the Royal Armouries for accommodating this particular webinar as well today to talk about this special kind of project that we've been working on for a number of months with regards to the Royal Armouries, but in terms of our development for our 3D virtual museum for a couple of years. So I'm Gurinder Mann. I'm a Sikh historian and director of the Sikh Museum Initiative. My work primarily has been looking at Sikh history and heritage for nearly 20 years now. So I've actually written extensively on the Sikh tradition, especially in terms of the founder of the Khalsa, Guru Gobind Singh, and in terms of the Sikh scriptures as well. But most importantly, the work I've been doing is also about actually uncovering new items as well, whether it be Sikh relics and artifacts, and mainly primarily to look at how the objects from Punjab have actually come to the UK as well. So as a result of that, we formed an organisation called the Sikh Museum Initiative to actually work with museums and private collectors, primarily in the UK, but also across the world as well, to kind of get a handle on the heritage that we have here in the UK. We know that the Toshokana, or treasure of the Sikhs, was taken from after 1849, which is the annexation of Punjab. So our organisation has been working with museums, up and down, UK, and we did our first exhibition in 2017 on the Anglo-Sikh Wars as well, which was great. And that was the first time when we were able to actually deploy some new technologies which had possibly never been seen before in, say, a Sikh heritage world, and possibly in other areas as well. And that incorporated 3D modeling, augmented reality as well. So it was just kind of like raising the bar in terms of what we can do in terms of heritage. So after that project, we wanted to get in touch with some of the flagship museums, including the Royal Armouries. So last year we actually had a dialogue with the Armouries in terms of actually undertaking a digital showcase at the Monarchs event last year, where we were able to actually bring our digital touchscreens into the museum, and where people, audiences of all ages, were able to view 3D relics on a touchscreen, as well as view them on a virtual reality headset as well. So the idea being that we can digitize objects from wherever location, and then present them, whether it be on a website, a tablet, on your mobile phone, for instance. And so this relationship has now come to fruition, in the sense that we've got a couple of objects which we're going to demonstrate and view today, and show them and show you all what it looks like in 3D. So I think that's probably where we're at, I think.
Fantastic. And Natasha, if I could ask you, could you give us a little bit of context as to the collection that we have in terms of Sikh objects that we have at the Royal Armouries?
Yeah, hi everyone. So before we're going to be looking at the individual objects that Taran and Gurinder have been working to interpret, I'm just going to give you a short background to the collection of Sikh arms and armour that we're lucky enough to have in the collection at the Royal Armouries. Now, we have about 100 objects where we have a pretty good indication that they're of Sikh origin. These include pieces of armour such as helmets, plate cuirasses which cover the main torso, mail shirts, trousers, arm guards, shields, and we've also got weapons which range from swords, daggers, maces and axes, bows and arrows, spears, the famous Sikh Quoit, firearms and firearm accessories such as powder flasks and ammunition pouches. Now, the majority of these objects dates the time when the Sikh Empire was emerging and in power, so 18th and early 19th century, up to the mid-19th century. Many of the objects that we have are really visually stunning. They reflect the glory of the Sikh court and the importance of its workshops for producing high quality arms and armour. And they also give a flavour of the image of power and strength and magnificence that would really have been projected by different elements of the Sikh armies, from the armour-clad Sardars or nobles to the Akali warriors, with those instantly recognisable blue turbans bristling with quoits, who were often equipped with multiple swords and guns apiece. They really...
Oh, it just sounds like we've lost Natasha briefly there. So we will do our best just to get her back for a second. But in the meantime, it's probably worth us moving on to our first object. So if I could invite Gurinder to introduce the first object, and we will have a quick chat about that.
Yeah, okay. If I can ask my colleague Taran to actually possibly share his screen first, and then we can start kind of looking at the object in more detail. So I think the key thing to kind of state right from the outset is that the actual process. I wasn't sure, Taran, were you going to actually want to discuss the process first, or shall we'll talk about that afterwards, if that makes sense. So yeah, so in terms of our kind of interpretation work, we came down to the Royal Armouries last year to actually kind of digitize a number of objects. And this particular one is we referring to as a Sikh helmet, essentially. Now, this has been in the collection for many years, and it's important to note that this particular helmet is actually very different to other kind of helmets that we actually see in the Royal Armouries, or even in various collections, so to speak. And this turban helmet essentially actually is kind of created where it actually has an area at the top where a Sikh's hair would actually be knotted at the top. So as probably most people may or may not be aware, the Sikhs wear the turban. So therefore, you know, the turban is actually wrapped around the hair. But these actual special helmets were made to accommodate the Sikh hair in this particular way. And whilst we think that it may appear very popular, it's not very clear as to how popular they really were. So essentially, we are aware that they did exist. We do know that they appear in the Royal Armouries collection, for instance. And most importantly, you know, the actual elaborate design on this is absolutely fascinating as well. So you can see the Koftgari work, which has actually been recreated in 3D by Taran here. And what we have is that it's, you know, it's got a thick border with stylized foliage and flowers as well. And it's very interesting because the chainmail is actually very, very vivid, which can be described in this particular item. I think the key thing to bear in mind is that how does this actually differ from other type of helmets, for instance? So if we look at, say, the Sikh Empire, for instance, and the Khalsa armies as well, generally we also see different types of helmets, which actually, you know, were deployed by the Sikh forces, but they generally have aggregates on, or plumes, for instance, and generally there were nasal guards available as well, which appears on not just Sikh items, but maybe, you know, Islamic kind of works as well in terms of these helmets. So that is where this headpiece does actually differ quite differently, I would say, from the pieces that we actually have in other collections, you see. And I think there's some other attributes to this as well, in the sense that the actual style of the Koftgari is very, very in depth as well. And from the records of the Royal Armouries, it was actually kind of given by Lord Hardinge of Penshurst in 1955, from what I understand. So he was an actual descendant of the Governor General Hardinge, who actually fought during the Anglo-Sikh War. So it actually came down into the family kind of collection, and then it was actually given to the Royal Armouries. So for those who are not aware, Hardinge was actually the Governor General during the Anglo-Sikh War, the first Anglo-Sikh War, and majority of the collection, well, not majority, but certain number of pieces in the 100 or so pieces that Natasha mentioned, many of them are attributed to the Hardinge family, for instance. So, you know, there is that kind of link between, you know, the actual area of Punjab and, you know, the actual personnel that were out there and these particular objects. So, like I said, this actual helmet is very, very unique, and, you know, actually has, you know, various kind of properties, which is kind of, just espouses the actual workmanship of the Lahore period as well. So we're thinking it's the early 1800 period for this kind of turban that's been created. And what Taran is actually showing now is this unique object which has been recreated in 3D. So, you know, it does have these benefits of using this kind of technology to actually produce these kind of items.
And I've got to just say, it is absolutely stunning what you guys have done with that object. I think we have Natasha back. Natasha, I'm really sorry to have cut you off mid-flow there. There's a lot of upset people in the comments because they were really enjoying what you were talking about. So if we could just cut back to you briefly.
I'm so sorry.
That's quite all right. It's the perils of running a museum from home. So these things happen when we're live. So yeah, Natasha, would we be able to sort of cut back to what you were saying about our collection of Sikh objects?
Of course, yes. I'm sorry, I believe I got to the objects arriving at the Tower of London. Yeah, basically this was as a result of the Anglo-Sikh Wars, which prompted a huge escalation in domestic interest in British military activity abroad. Mainly because the military prowess of the Khalsa and the standard of the Sikh Artillery Park really impressed British forces, and there was considerable excitement in the domestic sphere about a foe which really generated a great deal of respect and admiration. So this seems to have prompted the Master General of the Ordnance at the Tower to contact the Board of Directors at the East India Company and make a specific request for the company to go out and collect complete sets of arms and armour that were in use by the forces in India, with a particular emphasis on Sikhs. So that letter was sent in 1849.
Okay, I think the gremlins may be continuing there slightly with Natasha. We will come back to her, and I'm sure we will get to the end of her segment in a second. Gurinder, if we could go back to the helmet we were just talking about, in terms of the treasure itself, you mentioned that this is an extremely rare object. Is there any indication that the objects that were coming back from the Anglo-Sikh Wars, were they exclusively these rare artifacts, or were we seeing sort of everyday Sikh military objects coming back as well?
Well, that's part of the it's one of the good things about this group of objects, because this catalogue sets these pieces into very clear groupings. So we've got the arms and armour associated, which is thought to have been associated with the Sardars, so these armoured nobles who are wearing full helmets, cuirasses, mail shirts, the full works really. But also there's a separate section reserved for the Akali.
So Natasha's internet issues are continuing. Gurinder, are you able to pick up from where Natasha left off there?
Yeah, of course. The actual catalogues refer to different...
Armouries,
Sorry. So, Natasha, are you back at the moment, or? Right.
Am I what? Sorry.
Yeah, carry on. Sorry.
So anyway, moving on from that, not all the Sikh objects that we have came directly from the East India Company. Some arrived as a result of individual activity. So we've got a large number of objects that came to us through the family of Lord Harding, who was Governor General of India at the time of the
Okay, so I think what we will do is, if Natasha, if you can hear me, your audio is dropping in and out quite a lot. So if you're able to just reset your computer or maybe move closer to your router for the time being. So what I will do is, if I will just put the same question to Gurinder, if you're able to pick up on that point.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, Natasha, if you could just double check that your audio and your video are working properly, that'd be great. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in terms of the actual objects, for instance, you know, it was actually kind of viewed in terms of what was, you know, important at that particular time. But what we do understand is, during 1849, after the annexation of Punjab, what we then found is that there was a kind of like a cataloguing system of the Sikh relics and artifacts in the Tosha Khan in Lahore, for instance. The idea was that to actually kind of catalogue all these items. These items are actually kind of, you know, have been written down, and, you know, we do actually have records of them at the British Library, for instance. And we kind of have a list in terms of, you know, what items they were. And quite rightly, what happened was people like the Governor General Lord Dalhousie, for instance, he kind of cherry picked a number of items for himself, for instance. So he took some of the best items, like, say, you know, some of the actual flags that took place during the Anglo-Sikh Wars. He actually took the weapons of Guru Gobind Singh, for instance. So his own personal collection was composed of some of the greatest kind of assets that you would say of the Sikh Empire. But at the same time, there were like the run-of-the-mill objects which have come down as well, as long as it was like from the Lahore period. But what actually happened was there were some sales which took place in Lahore. So a number of items did get sold off by the British We don't know the exact details of what took place, but there was a lot of items that did actually be sold in the marketplace in the Punjab itself. So you know, there's this quasi kind of idea of what actually happened to the items after 1849. But yeah, primarily a lot of the items came back to the UK. And you know, during 1849, 1851, we do have this great exhibition of 1851 where, you know, the infamous Kohinoor diamond, which most people are aware of, was actually exhibited at this great exhibition, together with a lot of the items, or a subsequent number of items which are in the Royal Army's collection, which are, you know, already been catalogued, so to speak.
Fantastic. Natasha, shall we try again? How is your signal? I see there was a quick relocation on the fly there. Do we have you back? Potentially not a problem at all. So that, in that case, what I will do is I will bring Taran in. And Taran, you were behind the 3D modeling of this object. Can you give us a bit of a rundown about what it took to get the object in the amazing state that it is currently?
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Yeah, and Gurinder. Yeah, so basically we've started off with us kind of coming to the museum to see Natasha and sort of taking some very detailed photographs of the objects. So this is like the resulting photographs that we would kind of retouch and recolor so that they were all kind of matched. We would use a photogrammetry technique to kind of generate a 3D model of the model. And as you can see, it's never perfect. So we do a lot of manual editing on these. And then we can generate kind of textures from these photographs as well. And these are applied to the 3D model. And we try to extract different bits of information from the photographs as well. So you can see here, I've extracted the gold, so I can actually control the amount of reflection and kind of roughness of the gold material and texture. This shows you the low poly model. So for it to be able to work on a VR headset or even online, like I'm using it at the moment, it needs to be very low polygon. So we generate a low polygon mesh and then transfer all the detail into textures. And even with the chainmail as well, we couldn't model the chainmail in because it would be too complex. So we use like an opacity map, which is kind of like a black and white map, which kind of makes it sort of see through and gives us the kind of effect. So we kind of cheat it in a way a lot of the time. And what we're able to generate is a very realistic looking 3D model that we can render from different angles and actually reacts to the lighting environment. So it's actually a physically based material. We actually put metal and gold values into there and try to match it with the photographs so that we get a very accurate effect. So this is using a HDRI environment. So when we add an environment to it, a realistic environment, a photographic environment, the 3D model can actually look very real. And what we've done is we've actually generated this 3D animation, which is kind of showing what kind of level that we can achieve with this with this sort of kind of physically based material. We can actually create film quality renders. So yeah, this is the kind of animation that we can produce.
And as somebody that works in the museum around objects like this, Taran, it's amazing to see them because I will only ever see them from a given angle, usually in a low light. So to see these things coming alive is absolutely stunning. Are you able to give us an idea of how long it takes to sort of render something like this?
Yeah, I mean, so for example, what you saw before that I was manipulating, for example, this scene here, this is actually running at sort of 30 frames per second. So this is being calculated very fast. But for the animation sequence, this one here, it actually takes like, I think 5 minutes for each frame. And if that's like 30 frames per second, then you're looking at about 4 to 5 hours for 3 seconds of footage. Wow. So when we're doing this sort of film sort of quality, it obviously takes a lot longer.
Absolutely. No, that's truly stunning. I think I could watch that clip all day, but we have a time limit, so we should probably move on to our next object. So Gurinder, if I could hand over to yourself and tell us a little bit more about what we're going to be looking at next.
Right, okay, yes. So the next object that we're looking at is a shield, actually. So this was another object which we kind of brought forward in terms of, or suggested that, you know, would be an actual really great addition to the Anglo-Sikh Virtual Museum as well. So again, you know, we're looking at this as possibly being, you know, early 19th century. And again, it's a shield of watered steel, elaborately decorated with bordering gold porphyry. And this particular piece was actually presented by the East India Company in 1851. So, you know, during the time of the Great Exhibition, essentially. So there is this direct link from the Great Exhibition with this particular piece. So what we do find really nicely kind of actually exhibited here is a number of animals actually being kind of decorated around this particular shield. And it is more a case of questions actually really as to what these animals could be. So is it like, for instance, a peacock here? So if we look further down as well, is that a mongoose, or is it a crocodile, for instance? You know, it is something that, you know, maybe some of the actual viewers who are watching as well could probably elaborate on as well. So it is a very nice, and you've got the 4 embossed areas as well in the middle of the actual shield as well. So it's a very, very elaborate design. It does actually differ with some other designs from the Sikh Empire. So for instance, during the reign of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, for instance, there is other kind of shields which actually depict the Maharaja, even the Akali Nahums as well, around certain shields. There's one particular one in the Birmingham Museum Service, and there is one in the Victoria and Albert Museum as well. So there is kind of differences in terms of patterns and the way in the different types of shields that are available as well.
Fantastic, thank you, Gurinder. Natasha, I think we have you back. A few gremlins in the system tonight, I think it's fair to say. But what would be really interesting is if we could go back to the sort of context of our Sikh collection as a whole. I know you've sort of been cut off halfway through that a few times now, but if we're able to finish that bit, and then if you could go into the context for this object as well. That'd be really interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, with the shield we're looking at the moment is one of those pieces that came in via the East India Company. The helmet that we've just finished looking at while I was trying desperately to get back online was one of the ones that came in as a result of the Harding family depositing a large number of objects with the armouries at the Tower of London during the mid-20th century. And that's one of those pieces that Lord Harding seems to have picked up during his time in post, whether that was gifted to him or whether it was something that he acquired out of interest. We don't know, but that's a sign of a result of more personal interactions and relationships on different levels. And then the other group of pieces that plays a very considerable role within our Sikh collection are objects that we acquired from the Great Exhibition in 1851. And these pieces came in as a kind of a result of different collecting motivations on the part of the Tower authorities, resulting seemingly from a kind of a considerable level of concern almost within Britain around that time. Even though the empire was at its height, there was quite a lot of worry that as a result of industrialization and mass production, the quality of products coming out of Britain was actually deteriorating. So there was a lot of concern that British output couldn't compete on the same level as things coming from other areas of the world. And in the eyes of many observers, objects coming out of the workshops of artisans in South Asia were considerably superior to a lot of the things that Britain was producing. So at the Great Exhibition, there were vast displays of Indian arms and armour, and the Tower seems to have acquired a fair number of pieces that can be regarded as objects of curiosity. They were quite niche, but very exquisite. So it seems that they were probably purchased as part of this drive to encourage British craftsmen to come and look at these objects in museums, admire the skills that were being illustrated, and take that on board and use it as inspiration for the things that they were making themselves. So we do have some objects that seem to hold true to that idea. There's a particularly beautiful axe that we've got on display in the Oriental gallery, which is a Sikh axe, and it's got this gorgeous moulded haft and gilded blade. So that was probably really driven towards encouraging people to look at that in more detail. And also we have another helmet very similar to the first one that Gurinder and Taran showed you, which was moulded to accommodate the Sikh top knot and turban. We've got a partner to that one, which actually came in from the Great Exhibition. So yeah, mostly 19th century context, but arrived in the museum as a result of a lot of different influences and activities. So hopefully that gives you the bit of the background that would have been nice to set the scene if I'd actually managed to get through it. It should give you more of an idea as to what's behind the presence of some of these gorgeous objects within our collection. Back to you, Jack.
And Natasha, we're having a few questions coming in over social media about the sort of technical aspects of the object. Are you able to give us a bit of a rundown of the materials used and the techniques and that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. So the shield that we're looking at the moment, the underlying material is actually Wootz crucible steel. So it's the actual object itself. When you look at the surface, you can see this gorgeous rippling water defect, and that's a property of the steel from which it's constructed. It's very high carbon steel, so it provides a very robust defense. And around the edge here, we've got the very typical thick bands of Kufgari, which is onlay decoration. So the method by which that is produced, the craftsman will cross-hatch the upper surface of the steel, and then it's inlaid with gold wire, which is hammered into place. Gold wire or gold foil. And these very thick bands of dense floral decoration are regarded as pretty typical and closely associated with work that is thought to have come out of the workshops of the Sikh Empire, particularly Lahore. You'll see that kind of very dense ornamentation on quite a few of the objects that are displayed in our Sikh collection, and it's quite similar in nature to the ornamentation that you should have seen on the helmet the first time round. So you can see this continuing tradition throughout a lot of the pieces.
Gurinder, do you want to come in on this as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just going back to the point that Natasha made in terms of the kind of the actual response in relation to these objects in Victorian Britain, for instance. So something which I've kind of touched upon in the book that I've just released is that the actual, the craftsmanship which was actually kind of practiced in Punjab, for instance, was actually seen as being, of a very high quality. So as a result of that, we had companies like Wilkinson Swords, for instance, and we had companies like Birmingham's Elkington and Company, who also actually replicated swords, but on tea sets, for instance. So that was a different aspect to everything that was taking place as well. And we had companies like the Liberty of London and Procter & Co as well. So there's a number of companies which were kind of, using the patterns from Indian design and actually using it amongst different kind of aspects of, items really back in the UK.
Fascinating. And if we could just briefly go back to the kind of makeup, Natasha. I've had a few questions coming in about the padding and the handle on the back. Are you able to give us a bit of a rundown on what that's made of?
Yeah, sure. So one of the wonderful things about this project, as you can see, is that it enables you to see the object from both sides. So this shield is actually on display in the gallery, but of course, unless you've got mirrors or the stands revolving or what, you can only ever see one side of it. It's a static object. Whereas here we can see the shield, the interior of the shield. It's lined with velvet. And then you've got a padded cushion and the two grips, which are actually attached to metal rings, which are secured in place by those bosses that you see on the front of the shield. Sorry. And so in use, basically, you grip the two handles, and this enables you to move very, very dexterously and quickly. So the shield itself is quite light. I can't tell you off the top of my head what the actual weight is, but it's very maneuverable, but it gives you that really strong defense, and it's very easy to wield, and it obviously works in good partnership with your edged weapons.
Fantastic. A very quick Google on our collections website tells me that it's 1.95 kilograms. Does that sound right to you,
Natasha? Very much. Well done.
There we go. So I think, Taran, is now a good time to bring you in so you can tell us a little bit about how you created this object and some of the challenges that you may have faced.
Yeah, I mean, I think with this item, because there were two sides, we had two scans, and then we had to kind of merge the two together. So it's quite challenging. But this kind of detail at the front to try and get the kind of physical quality of the gold from kind of observing the photographs was really, kind of we spent a lot of time on trying to get that right. And even now we're still tweaking it even now. And if somebody came along and said, oh, well, actually, I think the metal is a bit more shiny, or the gold is like this, we can actually really tweak it quite finely. But also it enabled us to kind of put it into a VR environment as well. So this is actually me manipulating the object in a VR environment, and this actually allows you to experience the object, which I think is quite fascinating, because we go to the museum and we're able to see objects, but this actually enables you to pick it up. And when we see kids, especially the kids who come to the museum, they're able to pick up a sword or a shield. You see the excitement, as they play around with it, and I think that's especially kind of fascinating about this object.
Absolutely. And Taran, I wonder, are we able just to pull back up the mystery animal on the shield?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, Natasha, do you have any theories based on other kind of Sikh imagery, what it's likely that may be? I mean, in my personal view, I think crocodile, because of the sort of serrated teeth. I know there's lots of different theories on this. Do you have one yourself?
We were discussing this earlier today. I'm stumped for the time being. It just goes to show that even if you're curating a collection, you don't have final answers for everything. I mean, it's been catalogued in the past as possibly mongooses or mongoose. Whether that's likely, I think crocodile is possibly more accurate based on the snapping jaws. Gurinder can probably advise on the more likely motifs and their significance for Sikh culture, but I think it's up for debate, and that's what's so exciting about working with these objects. You never do have all the answers, and there's always something to investigate. So if somebody has a theory, that would be most welcome.
So yeah, exactly. So that's what we were kind of debating earlier on. So yeah, it does actually provide some food for thought in terms of what these animal pictures could be. I mean, obviously, crocodile scenes are very limited in terms of actual shields, for instance. But the jury's out, I would say. So let's just see if anyone else can come up with some kind of views on it, basically.
And Taran, you will have stared at this for more hours than probably anybody else in the world. Do you have a theory on this?
I'm not sure. I mean, I initially thought it would be just like a peacock, but because it's got 4 legs, I was kind of like lost, really.
Okay. So I guess we'll leave that mystery to the comment section to debate that one, whilst we move swiftly onwards onto our third object. Gurinder, would you like to introduce this one?
Yeah, so as part of our interpretation work, we wanted to obviously have a wide range of objects as part of our Anglo-Sikh Virtual Museum. Now, whilst we've just seen a helmet, this is not a helmet. This is what we call an Akali turban or Dastar Bunga, which actually kind of refers to the signature turban of the Akali Nahang. Dastar Bunga means crown towers, basically. So the turban is going upwards. And what we have is an example of this type of turban, which is worn by what we call these vanguard of the Sikhs, known as the Akali Nihangs. So the Akalis were kind of given this role, essentially. Now, you know, there's various theories, but, you know, they draw their kind of origins back to the time of Guru Gobind Singh as well, when, you know, the Sikhs were facing persecution from the Mughals and the Afghans as well. And so therefore, this vanguard of Khalsa warriors became known as Akali, which is, you know, timeless, basically. And the word Nihang also means carefree, or also means crocodile as well. And so the Nihangs were kind of like a one-man walking army, essentially. So they were draped with weapons, for instance. So they'd be wearing, you know, they'd have quoits around their necks, for instance. They'd have, you know, guns. They'd have various types of swords on their attire. But the actual turban that they wore was absolutely unique as well. So this particular turban, which Taran has now recreated partly in 3D, we are finishing off this work, is that the actual turban is composed of quoits. So the turban is composed of a number of quoits which go all the way to the top. We have a metal piece in the middle, sometimes referred to as a gajga, and also has a double-edged sword at the top of it. And then we have these kind of crescent or moon type crescents objects, which are actually adorning the actual gajga as well. So there's various types of weaponry on there. But also what most people miss is that there's some very small daggers in the corners as well. Now, interestingly, they are very, very small. And people may think, well, this also must be kind of, you know, for decorational purposes, but they're not. These were actually probably used in battle as well, because if you look at another type of warrior who was draped in like chainmail, for instance, this could actually go through very small areas, for instance. So, you know, in the form of actual battles, for instance, even the smallest object could have a devastating effect. But going back to the quoits, for instance, as well, they were actually kind of thrown with dexterity as well. We've got examples from the, you know, Sikh Empire period of the Nihangs actually using this against their enemies, for instance, all the way up to the time of the British Raj period as well, where we've actually seen examples of this type of Dastar Bunga or Kali turban being shown, you know, or being worn during that time, even in Sikh regiments, British Sikh regiments during that time. So there's a lot of history related to this particular object in terms of what it signifies, essentially. But one particular point I wanted to allude to was this cloth, which seems to be draping down from the end of the turban. And that is referred to as a farla. And the concept behind that is it refers to a high-ranking Akali Sikh who would be given that and is added onto the turban as well. So, you know, that explains this higher ranking Nahang as well, who would actually be wearing this type of turban, for instance.
Super, thank you, Gurinder. And Natasha, are you able to give us a little bit of the historical context of this object coming to the armoury specifically?
Yeah, so this again was one of the pieces that came in as part of that East India Company shipment. So we know that it's been in the museum's collection since the mid-19th century. So I mean, it's probably not much older than that. It's likely to have been from around that immediate time, and then ended up in the displays at the Tower. I mean, it's always been a very, very evocative piece for us. It really engages with audiences. It's very, very recognisable, and of crucial cultural significance. So whether it actually came off the battlefield, I don't know. It's currently mounted on a kind of internal frame, so it's quite rigid. So as I say, whether it came off the battlefield, I mean, I doubt it would have been presented to somebody, because you're not likely to just give up your turban. Gurinder might be able to advise more on that, but yeah, we know for sure that it's East India Company presentation piece, and it's getting on for 200 years old. So
yeah, I think additionally what we can add to that is that whilst we do actually even have evidence of this, of Akali turbans being picked off the battlefield. So for instance, Lord Logan, who was in charge of the treasury, he was actually participated during the Anglo-Sikh wars. So he refers to picking up of Akali turban during the battles, for instance. And we also know that there's other type of Akali Dastar Bungas in other collections. So for instance, at the Victoria and Albert Museum, there's one which is a very, very centerpiece turban, which is most people are kind of aware of, but they also have a secondary Akali turban as well, which is in their stores, for instance, and that kind of mirrors quite very similar to this particular turban that we have here in the Armouries, for instance, as well. So we can kind of make some kind of loose associations. From my point of view, these kind of turbans would have definitely been picked up from the battlefield, for instance. But we do know the V&A one, which is on display, that was actually taken from the treasury of Lahore, for instance. So, you know, different makeups and different examples of where these were actually taken from.
And Gurinder, are you able to give us an idea of how long these sort of turbans were used in combat? And is there a modern day sort of equivalent of this as well?
It's a really good question, because you know, there is various theories on when this Akali turban actually came in vogue, or when actually they were around. There's the idea that it was developed during the time of Guru Gobind Singh. There's stories related to his son Baba Fateh Singh, for instance, in terms of the Akali turban. There's another idea of a Nahang Singh called Mann Singh, for instance, who's credited for it. But we are aware that they did exist during the 18th century. We have examples from the chronicler Ratan Singh Bungu, for instance, who talks about, you know, the Sikh vanguard having quoits, and, you know, around their turbans, for instance. So we definitely think it's a product of the 18th century. But by the time we do get to the 19th century, and we do know quite clearly that the leader of the Nahangs, his name is Akali Fulla Singh. So, you know, there's depictions of him wearing the Akali turban, for instance, and, you know, there's it's been paramount throughout the ages. So even to this modern day now, so we have Nahang Singhs who wear this style of turban. It may not be in this context where it's actually in the sense of the you know, Dastar Bunga, but we do have the symbology from this particular turban. And so, yeah, the Sikhs would wear, even now, would wear quoits on their turbans, and these half crescent or these moon type images that you can see on this render here, that would actually be worn by the Nahang Singhs to this very day as well. So the symbology has not been lost, and the aspect of the quotes has not been lost throughout the ages as well.
Fantastic, thank you, Gurinder. Taran, if I could bring you in on this, just tell us a little bit about what we're looking at now. What sort of challenges did you face in creating this object? Oh, Taran, you're still muted.
Yeah, so we wanted to show an object kind of in progress. So what is actually the makeup of it? Because obviously what the resulting effect that you get isn't actually what the geometry depicts. So this is kind of, we've purposely not put the kind of material texture on this, just to show people kind of this is the underlying kind of mesh that that kind of makes up the 3D model. But this one is like a work in progress. So we've done all the metal work on this. So we usually sometimes try to break up the model into different parts. So we focus on the metal parts, and then next we'll focus on the cloth parts and make sure that they're completely accurate. And we're always kind of referring back to the photographs as well to make sure, because obviously if you're just modeling something, it's fine. You can basically just get it kind of close. But I think when you're doing objects from a museum or objects that actually exist, it's kind of really essential that you kind of really observe in detail all the kind of wear and tear, you know, all the bits of rust, all the kind of you know, cracks and kind of you know, the surface detail on the object. So this is the kind of thing that we're kind of working on with this, and especially when you're working on organic objects traditionally are very hard to do in 3D. So we're kind of using a sort of a sculpting technique on this. So where we need to kind of accentuate the effect of the cloth, we'll probably sculpt in those details by viewing it. So the whole process is kind of like a technical process, but also a creative process as well. So we try and blend the two. So we need to understand technically what we're trying to do, but also creatively, we need to make sure that it looks right and it depicts the object accurately as well.
So how many man hours would you say we are away from looking at a finished Quoit turban here?
Yeah, so this we're looking at probably about another 15 hours of work on this, and then we'll be ready to kind of yeah, we'll have all the cloth work, and then it's about observing it and then making sure the cloth kind of reacts with the light correctly. So yeah, so I'd say about another 15, maybe 18 hours.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Taran. We've just had a couple of questions coming in about the object itself. So if I could bring Natasha and Gurinder back in about this one. Natasha, you mentioned that we in the museum keep the turban on a sort of structure. What would give the turban its natural rigidity if it was to be worn, and to what extent is the turban itself actually hollow, and how much is it armored, I suppose, as well?
Well,
about 5 questions for you. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. That's so. In the display currently, the turban sits on its own little perspex platform, but inside it is hollow, and then it's mounted on a frame. But I'm not actually sure whether that is a kind of product of how it will have been worn originally, or whether the turban is built up around the hair of the Akali warrior. I mean, some of them are so towering, hence the name, that they have to have had some sort of internal support structure, I assume. But Gurinder, do you know whether frameworks were brought in to elevate the height to very lofty?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing about the star and wearing of the turban is it is actually worn around the hair. So you know, not myself, but say Taran or other initiated Sikhs would actually weave the turban around the hair, for instance. That would be an intricate part of how the turban would actually stand. Now, interestingly enough, the Quoits would actually kind of keep part of it intact as well. And we do not know of anything else that would be in the turban itself to actually give it that structure, as far as we know. So actually, from what we understand, it is the actual weaving of the turban around the hair and then keeping certain parts in, you know, certain parts in to keep it rigid during whilst the Nahang Singhs were wearing it.
Yeah,
So
I think what they tend to do is they tend to kind of so they will weave their hair into the cloth, so they have an extra bit of cloth, and then that will tie around into a top knot. And I've actually seen someone do it in India, like not as big as this one, but a sort of largish one. And then what he did was he actually kind of tied it around, so he made this sort of conical base. And then what they would do is he would have his internal hair come up again, and then he would wrap another cloth around it to kind of make this little tower.
Right.
Yes, so as the kind of hair came in, so that would be the central structure, and then there would be another turban that they would tie up, and then they would just like build it up to keep that in place. So I think the one that I saw was probably half this size, but I could see the way that, you know, by just keeping that internal kind of hair structure going upwards, then they would support it around. But I think if you go on YouTube and you look for a Akali turban, you'll actually see some demonstrations of some Nihang Singhs who are tying quite large ones and different ways of tying them.
Well, also, I mean, it points back to the fact that textile itself can be an incredibly effective form of armor just independently. So textile and hair can provide a really robust padded defense. So not just in Sikh turbans, but textile is in use throughout all sorts of armour. It's got really good defensive properties, so that's probably, I know there's other relevances as well within, sort of embedded within the turban, but just textile as armour, really good defence.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the interesting thing is, something I did mention is, whilst we actually looked at it in terms of defensive mechanisms and attack in terms of the quoits, but the key point about the quoits are to actually stop, you know, sword thrusts, you know, against that person and, you know, against the head. So, you know, it is considered to be a protective property of the Nahan Singhs, whilst at the same time having, you know, adorned with so many weapons which can be used in battle as well. So it has that double kind of significance, essentially.
Super, thank you, Gurinder. I think that probably is a nice natural way to mark the end of our sort of discussion phase of the stream. And if we now sort of shimmy into the Q&A section, there's been lots of questions coming in throughout. But if you have any burning questions for anybody on the stream, then do pop them in the comments now, and we'll try and get to as many over the next sort of 10 or so minutes as we can. If I could completely jump the queue and ask one of my own. In my eyes, and in many others, Sikhs are very much renowned as a very effective fighting military force. Why is this, Gurinder? Where does this sort of stem from? And yeah, how have they built this incredible reputation as being a military fighting force?
Well, essentially, the Sikh tradition actually may have seemed to have been passive. So when Guru Nanak, the first Guru, for instance, is, you know, generally seen as having a saintly persuasion, for instance. But from the compositions of Guru Nanak, it's quite clear he was against tyranny, he was against injustice, for instance. So by the time we get to the fifth Guru, Guru Arjan Dev, we actually find that the Sikhs are being persecuted, you know, left, right, and center. So it is kind of, you know, thoughtfully kind of devised that the sixth Guru, Guru Hargobind, would actually be, you know, have a military kind of persona to him. So hence be called a saint soldier. We call it Sant Sabai. He'd be a saint soldier and would combine, you know, the saintly aspects of the religion with the actual martial qualities as well. So that was the earlier kind of tradition. And then when we get to the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh, he actually creates the order of the Khalsa, which invokes the wearing of the turbans and, you know, militarizes the Sikhs in the sense that, you know, the Khalsa order is about, you know, protecting the masses essentially. But that's when the Guru actually also introduces various combat strategies as well, like Shastra Vidya, you know, the science of weapons, and, you know, teaching the Sikhs in terms of in order how to fight. So therefore, you know, we get that tradition from Guru Gobind Singh, and then throughout the 18th century with the Sikh missiles and the Confederacy, you know, during the times of, say, one of the greatest warriors, Jassa Singh Ahluwalia, had to face when the onslaught of the Afghans, so Nadir Shah, for instance, and, you know, Abdali from the Durrani Empire, for instance. And the Sikhs were very small in number, but their battle tactics were very, very superior in the sense that they never fought, you know, the opposing armies head on. So they would actually pick off the armies as they were leaving, for instance, and they would use tactics called Daibat, which is 2.5 strikes. So they would strike and they would retreat. They would strike and they would retreat. So, you know, using strategies which were, you know, kind of very, very kind of alien to some of the bigger forces that we see during the 18th century. But they did it effectively to the point where, you know, in 1783, the Sikhs took over Delhi. So, you know, it was actually showing that on one aspect they were fighting the Afghans and the Mughal Empire, but also, you know, fighting against the Marathas, for instance, as well. And a small skirmish with the English, but that was very limited during the 18th century.
Natasha, do you want to come in on that one at all as well?
I mean, carrying on from that earlier context as well, obviously, when you get to the Anglo-Sikh Wars, the British were, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned, I don't know if I was offline at that point, but the British were extremely impressed by the armies that they were facing. Maharaja Ranjit Singh had done a huge amount to hone his armed forces and his artillery park. The guns that he had at his disposal were more than a match for the British guns. They were regarded as on a par, if not better. There were all these reports flooding back to Britain about the ferocious way that the Sikhs fought, and the struggle that the British had to ultimately defeat them. And even later on in the 19th century, I've come across mention of the ferocity and prowess of the Sikh forces in totally disconnected published sources. So there's a book that was written about the Indian collections of the Victoria and Albert Museum, where the writer called to mind the terrible fighting power of Sikh warriors, relating to the arms and armour that he was briefly mentioning. But he said, you know, everybody will know how famous the Sikhs are, essentially, for their ability to fight. So they carried that reputation on. Well, until the current day, as we know, because now in popular culture and in broader awareness, the Sikh culture as a whole is regarded as quite martial, and there's a lot of connection with the martial history, and the arms and armour is a part of that, which obviously works out brilliantly for us and the audiences who are interested in our collection that we hold at the Armouries. So win.
Absolutely.
The additional point, if you don't mind, Jack, is that during the time of Maharaja Ranjit Singh as well, it was a different type of makeup of the army. So there was a very much a Europeanization of the army as well. Looking back at, you know, when the British had actually entered Sikh territory as early as 1805, and then leading to the Treaty of Amritsar in 1809, which led Maharaja Ranjit Singh to start employing you know, many Europeans across different nations, and they were mercenaries, and you know, they're looking for pay and employment, but they actually embedded into the Sikh Empire very, very effectively, to a point where they were, you know, became very, very superior generals within the Sikh army, and you know, they trained them to a very, very high standard.
Fantastic, thank you. I'd just like to apologise to everybody that my question has soaked up so much time, but that was a fascinating answer from both of you, so I really appreciate the depth of that. So if we do go to some audience questions, one coming in on Facebook from Bhagat Singh, and he says that Nihang means, and forgive my pronunciation if that's terrible, Nihang means crocodile. Is it possible that this may be what's depicted on the shield?
Yeah, I mean, like I did say, we have very rare instances of crocodiles on shields, for instance. But yeah, exactly, that connection could be made. So Nihang does mean crocodile, and there could be association with this particular kind of shield. So yeah, why not?
Another one probably more for Natasha. This is from Heidi McCormick, and she asks if velvet was normal on shields. And would the fact that it's velvet more imply that it was for display rather than for use in combat, Natasha?
No, velvet is very typically found on shields. It's quite a tough material, actually, and you do find it on body armour as well. Having said that, Heidi, you're right. This shield is pretty exquisite to look at. So the odds are that it was probably a high status piece, beautifully fitted out with the backing material, and possibly intended to be worn on parade, for instance. But just because it's velvet doesn't preclude it from being a practical object. It will have still had defensive capability. But it is a beautifully rich material. You're right. So it was probably intended to be seen and admired.
Fantastic, thank you. Taran, I think this one is probably for you. Chloe Toussaint, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and my apologies if I haven't. Are we able to interact with these 3D models via our VR headsets at home?
Okay, so we've uploaded the models to Sketchfab online, and you can access them via our website, which is Anglo-Sikh-Museum.com. If you go to the relics section, and when you open it up into Sketchfab in your browser on your VR headset, you've actually got a VR little icon there that you can click on, so you can actually run it in a VR headset. So while it's not running natively, it'll be running through a web page, but it enables you to view the object in VR, and you can actually view it on a mobile phone as well. So if you have a mobile phone and you run this, I've actually tried to run all the 3D models on a mobile phone, and they run very efficiently. And there's a little icon at the bottom with 2 glasses, and if you click on that and put your phone into a Google Cardboard, which is kind of like one of these little devices, so you put your phone into there, you open it, you put your phone in, and you can actually view it in VR in one of these as well.
Fantastic, thank you, Taran. And a few questions coming in about the turban as well. What was the silver rope that was wrapped around the turban, and are the dagger handles hollow like spearheads? Who wants to take that one?
I'll start off. Yeah, so the actual wiring is there. We call it a dora, basically. So that's the actual wiring which actually keeps the weapons intact as well, and that's where you can see the small kind of kirpans on coming down on the Akali turban. So that's just a wiring just to keep the kind of turban intact. In terms of the actual are they hollow, I would probably say no, they're not hollow from my understanding.
I wish we had a conservator with us, because they're the ones who will obviously know that in more detail. Again, I'm inclined to believe that they're probably solid. They're quite small items, but from memory, they are most likely to be solid. But as I say, we'd have to be speaking to somebody who's actually taken it apart for preservation and cleaning, and has had a bit of a closer look at it recently than I have. It's not something I've actually thought to check, so thank you for that. I'll have a better look next time.
Well, we will stick that one on the to-do list, and we can probably get back to them on Facebook, so no problem at all. Another one coming in here, how prevalent was full body armor for Sikh warriors, as many of the contemporary artwork shows them with no armor on appendages, especially knees and shins?
Well, this is actually a really good question, especially because it ties in with our Anglo-Sikh Virtual Museum. So to actually have a breastplate, or what we call jarena, the Persian for 4 mirrors, for instance, we've actually modeled in 3D the jarena of Guru Gobind Singh, which is actually on our Anglo-Sikh Virtual Museum. So we do know that at least it was worn during the time of Guru Gobind Singh, so late 1600s, was when the Sikhs actually did wear these kind of body armor. How prevalent was it? It's very hard to say. We do know that the Sikh missiles and the confederacies wore the actual jarenas as well. And we do know that all different kind of pieces, I mean, even in the armies, for instance, we know that there's cuirassiers or jarenas within the collection, together with these pieces being available in other collections as well, whether it's the Royal Collection and the V&A as well. So yeah, whether it was standard material during the 18th century is very hard to say, but during the Sikh Empire period, yes, it would have been more prevalent during that time of the Maharali Ranjits.
Natasha, do you want to come in on that one at all? Or?
I was going to go back to the point that obviously there were very Europeanized elements within the Sikh army by the time you get to the mid-19th century, but there were still these very traditional elements. So even though armor wasn't necessarily worn mainly for practical protection, because by that point it was essentially obsolete with the widespread introduction of firearms on the battlefield, but it was still worn on quite a large scale by high-ranking individual nobles. We've got lots of descriptions of bodies of troops, you know, sparkling in their armour. So you do get these separate units who were more known for adhering to those traditions, presenting themselves in armour. It's meant to impress. I mean, if you look at a lot of the armour from around this time, you'll see that particularly with the mail, it's constructed from very, very fine butted links. That means in practical terms, it's not very effective. If it's subjected to any sort of impact, it breaks apart, it shatters, but it did look very good. You were able to create this very fine effect. You could embed different metals. So in the net guard that we looked at before, that's got brass and iron links in. So even though brass is quite soft, it looked fantastic. So you get this very, very fine metal work, and when this is worn as a full suit, because you get full mail shirts and trousers, and then you get the decorative breastplate over the top, the really elaborate helmets full of gilded metalwork, that would create a stunning spectacle, and it would, you know, create quite a lot of awe if you were facing a body of troops wearing that on the battlefield. Or alternatively, you know, the parades through the city, displays of might, it's all about appearance. So I would say that they were quite widespread still, but not necessarily used for the same practical purposes that they had been centuries before.
And we do actually have a really great anecdote as well from the meeting between Maharaja Ranjit Singh in 1831 with the Governor General of India, Lord William Bentinck, at Ropar in the Punjab on the Sutlej River, for instance. So the meeting was to define the next Anglo-Sikh treaty, but it was an absolutely pompous affair with the actual Gurjara, the elite forces of the Sikhs. And we actually had the Allard, Monsieur Allard, who was the European general. He had his dragoons there as well. And we actually have this quote which says their uniform is a steel helmet in the shape of a Sikh turban, red coats with black belts, white trousers and jackboots. Their arms, the spear, sword, carbine and pistol. So, you know, absolutely this pomp and ceremonial kind of way of actually showing the Sikhs. In that context, when they met the Governor General and the British were saying, I think we're underdressed.
Fantastic. I think we have time just for one more quick question. It's coming from David, and he's asked, was Sikh armour / shields able to stop musket balls?
I think that links back to what I was just saying. By the period that most of our armour is coming from, probably not. It may have deflected to a certain extent, but if somebody was a good shot, probably not. It's not being worn for those reasons. It's primarily for the appearance and the fear factor, I think. But I mean, again, it depends as well what period of firearms you're looking at. So matchlocks were still quite prevalent within Indian fighting forces at this time. But having said that, European style guns were becoming far more prevalent. So no, armour probably wouldn't have stood up against that sort of impact.
I have heard stories of even during like the First World War, some of the lieutenant generals saying that Sikhs would sometimes pick bullets out of their turbans, that they would have them so tightly packed, and especially like during 1914. Yeah, so I think I got one of the quotes here from Lieutenant General Sir Reginald Savory. He said, "I have known Sikhs to pick bullets out of their turbans during and after battle. In fact, the turban absorbs the shock of a bullet, possibly rather better than a tin helmet. If the turban is properly tied, it will also form an effective buffer too."
That's a perfect illustration of what we were saying before about the defensive capabilities of turbans and textile in general. So yeah, cloth, if properly wadded, can potentially offer more protection than metal, which is interesting.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I think that probably draws us to a close for this evening. I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody that's been involved. It's really, really interesting chat. I know, Gurinder, you just wanted to quickly mention a little bit about your funding before we close, so I'll just hand over to you quickly.
Yeah, the project that we're doing, the Anglo-Sikh Virtual Museum, is actually funded by the National Heritage Lottery Fund, so we're indebted to them for kind of funding our kind of program, which is now almost coming to the end of phase 1, essentially. So we're indebted to them. Obviously, you know, we'd like to thank the Royal Armouries as well for supporting us on this particular project as well. I think in the chat that's been put up there, we will actually kind of put some links to the work we've been doing as well. So we'll add that on later on as well. But yeah, no, thank you.
No problem at all. Well, I mean, if anybody wants to find out any more about any of the objects that we featured today, then you can, of course, go on our collections website, where they have a lot more information, a lot more technical details about them. So please do go and check them out there. Obviously, we're really hoping that this relationship with the Anglo-Sikh Museum continues, because, I mean, it's A, a lot of fun, and B, the results that you guys are coming up with are just outstanding. So we hope that that continues and that we scan a lot more objects moving forward. I am duty bound to, again, of course, remind you about our other live stream that we have coming up tomorrow. As mentioned previously, it features our Keeper of Firearms and Artillery, Jonathan Ferguson, interviewing a world-renowned movie armourer, Larry Zarnoff. So that's going to be really good. I'm not just saying that, honestly, it will be. So do check that out. That's on our Facebook and on our website. And also to check out our membership scheme. If you are as excited as we all are that the museum's back open on the 16th of September, then you are able to jump the queues, sign up to be a member, and yeah, you get exclusive offers on things in the shop and exclusive events, that kind of thing. So why would you not want to do that? So yeah, that's basically it from us. I just want to say a huge thank you to Natasha Bennett, Gurinder Singh Mann, and Taran Singh. That's all from us, and yeah, hopefully see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.